So I really want to let you know that today our webinar is brought to you by the Neighborhood Learning Community of Practice. These are the kinds of discussions that we have and are growing out of the Neighborhood Learning Community. So if you'd like to learn more or just get involved with a group of your peers from across Canada, please feel free to join us. We'd love to have you as a member. So again, welcome to today's webinar, Fostering Community Through Neighborhood Grants. My name is Glenda Cooper. I'm a manager of cities with Cities Deepening Community. And I'm here today to introduce our discussion with Christine Bennett and Joy Nordstrom from the City of Calgary, Jenna Van Claveren from the City of Kitchener, and Michael Hill from the City of Victoria. Joy Nordstrom resides in Treaty 7 territory and is a community social worker for the City of Calgary. She's been using microgrants as a tool for community development in the targeted neighborhoods over the last 10 years. And she believes that small grants are an effective tool for building capacity and leadership skills in the community. Christine Bennett also resides in Treaty 7 territory and is a team lead for the community social work program at the City of Calgary. She supports her team who employ a community development approach in targeted neighborhoods. Jenna Van Claveren is a project manager at the City of Kitchener's Neighborhood Development Office, supporting the Love My Hood neighborhood strategy, the administration of the Love My Hood matching grants to help develop resident-led initiatives. She believes that the best neighborhoods are made by the people who live there and is passionate about supporting them to bring their ideas to life. And Michael Hill is a community development coordinator with the City of Victoria for 15 years and has been working with neighborhoods throughout that whole time and supporting them in their neighborhood development work. So welcome to everybody. We're so glad to have all of you here with us today. For those of you who've read the case study, these are the 3 communities that were featured. For those of you who have not, we will send out a link afterwards so that you can read more about the work that they're up to. So right now I want to turn it over to Joy and Christine from the City of Calgary to walk us through and tell us a little bit about their community grant.
Okay, hi everyone. So our community social workers and our community social work team, we work in priority neighborhoods. That means we're not in every neighborhood. But where we are, we work with and for socially and economically marginalized people, and we use a community development approach. So we provide opportunities for community members to come together, take action on issues that impact their lives and their neighborhood, and develop community-made solutions to their collectively experienced issues. So on the next slide, we talk about why do we use grants? Well, we know neighborhood granting is a proven tool in the community development toolbox, and it can lead to resident improvements in leadership, organizational skills, increased community engagement, and inspiring to residents of neighborhoods when they see local improvements through the quick wins of local decision making. Our neighborhood granting is based on the knowledge that communities can be effective agents for change, and when people are given the opportunity to work out their own problems, they can find solutions that have a more lasting effect than when they are not involved in problem solving. We have 3 granting streams that residents in our targeted neighborhoods can apply for. And so the next slide shows our first stream. And it's all about increasing economic participation. And so really this stream is about small scale initiatives that keep money into people's pockets. And so some of the most frequently applied for projects include applications for lending libraries of some sort. So promoting that shared economy. So pictured here is a tool lending library. And this idea came to be when a resident and a community social worker were talking about what is needed in their neighborhood. And one of the residents mentioned that they just didn't have the means to purchase lawnmowers and other equipment to do home maintenance. And then one resident in that meeting commented that the previous summer, to avoid a $150 fine for an unkept lawn, she spent 3 hours hand cutting their grass with scissors on their front lawn. They couldn't afford the fine, and they couldn't afford the lawnmowers. So out of this whole conversation, the lending library of tools was formed. In our next slide, we'll talk about our second granting stream.
Hi there. This is probably our most well-used stream for the neighborhood grants. And I think we forgot to mention ours are only up to $1,000 too. So they're grassroots in nature. Here we're looking for projects that help community members feel welcome and involved in their community. An applicant needs to be able to explain how the project will help build connections between neighborhoods from different backgrounds. They also need to have a plan for reducing barriers so that everyone will feel welcome, especially maybe those folks who don't normally attend community events. While we do, of course, encourage residents to share their unique skills and abilities with others, and we've seen all kinds of projects like origami clubs, soap making, chess clubs, sewing groups, it's still that inclusion can't just be an afterthought. It must be the primary driver of the program. Pictured is the Sun Elta Gingerbread Winter Festival. It was a project to bring community residents together. We had lots of newcomer families attend who had never even made a gingerbread house before. Still, the main purpose was to meet others and build connections in their community. The next slide tells about our last stream. Our community social work program works with residents and a variety of stakeholders to further the promise of both the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the City of Calgary's White Goose Flying Report. Through this stream, we are able to animate TRC work at a community level. Examples of projects we've seen include meditation and healing circles, a 60s scoop peer support group, a ribbon skirt workshop, and Kairos blanket exercises. Pictured here is the Acadia Friendship Circle. This group's primary objective is to bring Indigenous and non-Indigenous families together to promote knowledge and understanding. We can flip to the next slide.
So what makes our program unique is that our community social workers, they can work with the applicant from the idea stage right through to the implementation and evaluation stage. And so because we're really targeting residents in neighborhoods that haven't had the opportunity to possibly contribute to their neighborhood in a meaningful way, we know that there's multiple barriers. So I think that's what really possibly makes our program the most unique, is that built-in staff support all along the way. By providing this extra value of assistance, we do see a great diversity of who's applying and what they're applying for. It's a very positive experience in confidence building, leadership skill development for the people that are applying. And it can be time intensive, but it's worth it.
Okay, on the next slide. And I think we've almost used up Calgary's time. So I'll finish off here to say that we used a localized approach to decision making. We work with resident advisory committees in their neighborhoods to make recommendations on grant applications. So they're again supported by the community social worker. This model helps decision making stay local, helps grow leadership capacity on the ground, and gives a voice to marginalized residents. We can, I think, talk about this a bit later because I've had a sneak peek at Glenda's questions. Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Calgary. That's so inspiring to hear the work that you're up to, and I can't wait to dig in and hear more of some of those technical aspects as well. I'm really looking forward to hearing more. Over to Jenna in Kitchener.
Thank you. So I'll just start off with a brief overview of our vision for Love My Hood. It's that residents are leading projects in their neighborhood and leading change in their neighborhood, and the city is providing them support along the way, whether it be through resources and toolkits and guides and things like that, or our neighborhood liaisons who similarly help to provide one-on-one support to resident groups and can help provide help with the grant applications, to our grant itself and how that provides funding and can help build capacity in different neighborhoods as well. And so this is kind of the vision behind Love My Hood and the vision behind the Love My Hood matching grant as well. So we can hop to the next slide. So previously we had three different grants, I should say. The Placemaking Challenge Grant, the Community Garden Grant, and the Neighborhood Matching Grant. And through these three granting streams, which we had launched in 2017 till 2020, we supported over 90 resident-led projects across the city, spanning from, of course, community gardens through our Community Garden Grant, placemaking projects like pianos in public spaces, and events as well, to name a few. So we've had a wide range of projects supported through our previous grants, some of which I'll talk about in the next few slides. So we can go to the next one. So one of these projects was on Mackenzie Avenue, and this project came out of an issue that they had in the past where there was a break-in on the street, and one of the neighbors realized they didn't know the woman whose house had been broken into. So fast forward to 13 years later, and we can jump to the next slide. Their solution was these ongoing parties that they had on their street for the past 13 years, as I had mentioned, and they used a neighborhood matching grant to help support their event and kind of grow it and celebrate how far they came in their journey as a street and a neighborhood. And so with the grant last year, they were able to include a dog agility course, a bouncy castle, and other elements to kind of enhance it a bit more and connect with all of their neighbors on a different level. Another example of this is in Thomas Lee Park. So they had an issue in terms of not being enough seating in their park gathering space. And they also used a neighborhood matching grant, which was one of our previous grants, to install these seating elements and shade structures to create more gathering spots for different uses, from mothers who want to breastfeed to children in school groups who may use them for field trips, to morning coffee that some senior citizens would utilize the space for. So that's another example of more of a capital project that the grant has been used for. And then we have the pollinator patch in Forest Heights in Meadow Lane Park. And this group was very focused on sustainability and environmental issues, and they came together with the neighboring schools to install a huge pollinator patch, which they did a lot of other fundraising initiatives outside of the grant. And in total, they raised about $20,000 to install this large greening project in their park to enhance the space. So those are just some examples of what the grants have been used for. In 2020, we just launched our new Love My Hood matching grant. So we can go to the next slide. And this matching grant is similar to all the others in that it's meant to be used to enhance spaces, to strengthen a sense of belonging and neighborhood pride, to develop community relationships and build capacity and new and emerging wards and neighborhoods, and to create more and safe and accessible spaces as well. So in growing this grant and consolidating the three grants into this one larger grant, we're able to offer more funding per project, and which is now up to $30,000 per project, $10,000 for projects on private land, which we've expanded to with this new grant as well. And events are eligible for up to $2,000. So we now have kind of introduced elements from our past three grants, including the quarterly intake periods, which were a part of our neighborhood matching grants. And we found that these have been really successful in building capacity and setting up groups who maybe weren't successful in one round of the intake periods with their neighborhood liaisons to help them develop a stronger grant application and kind of flesh out their idea a little bit more. And the decisions of who selects these successful projects per intake period is the responsibility of our selection committee. And actually this year is the first year where we have more resident volunteers on the committee than staff. We feel like that really aligns with the idea of resident-led and city-supported. So we're excited to support even more grants this year and projects across the ward with a greater focus on equity as well through this new matching grant. So that's a little bit about our program so far and our new grant as well.
Great, thanks so much, Jenna. I'm just so inspired by the work that everyone is doing and how these neighborhood grants are making a difference in the neighborhoods. Before we move on to the next thing, I'm just so excited also to hear from the City of Victoria, to hear how they have been implementing their Migrate Neighborhood grants. So over to you, Michael.
Hi, everyone. Good morning from Victoria. So just a little bit of background. The Victoria is 90,000 people. Unlike our sister cities here, it's quite a small community. So keep that in mind, even though we're part of Greater Victoria, which is about 400,000 people. Next slide, please. So our program started in 2016, our Great Neighborhood Grant. We've got 123,000 in the budget for 2019, relatively small. We have spring and fall intake, so twice a year, and we divide our grants up into placemaking and activity grants. So a little bit more money for the placemaking if you want to create something that's tangible and has some longevity to it, like the little libraries we're all familiar with seeing. Next slide. So spring and fall, the number of grants we've put out, 158 grants so far over the last 4 years, and really high success rate. Less than 5 projects have been canceled after approval for whatever reason. Somebody can't fulfill the terms of their grant or whatever. Next slide. Eligibility, any individual organization can apply. If you're not a not-for-profit, you must have a sponsor who's a not-for-profit. Both the applicant and the sponsor sign the agreement, and the agreement basically covers their responsibilities and terms, which we find are really important to remind people what they've committed to doing. Even though we don't set the bar particularly high, we do have some terms that we want them to keep in mind to bring it to completion. Next slide. The application process, like my colleagues, we really are supportive of the whole application. That's probably the most important part, is to really cultivate a relationship with our applicants. There's a mandatory preliminary meeting to talk about your ideas so they don't get off down the wrong road. We can have an opportunity to assess their capacity and to plan the details of the project, and really coach them into creating projects that are realistic and they can actually complete. We do only recommend projects to council that are sound and we have a lot of confidence in. We won't take them forward if we don't have that feeling, and we usually talk to our applicants to modify their plans or provide more time and suggest they take the next intake if they're not fully prepared. We always ask council for full funding. We don't really believe in partial funding if we've got something that we're confident in. And then we maintain dialogue throughout the whole year. Next slide. I don't want you to get in the details of this, but I just simply wanted you to know that we do a matrix to review our grants, mostly for accountability purposes. Some rate higher and some rate lower, but we never take any forward that don't meet a basic threshold of being supportable. So you can see the first 3 criteria really relate to community engagement, how the community is involved in it, both the support for the idea, involvement during the execution of the project, and then what kind of a legacy does it leave, whether it's an activity or a project with the community. And of course, we look at the organizer's capacity to complete the project and the quality of the proposal as being 2 criteria that help us give us the confidence in that they'll be successful. Next slide. Then we can look at the number of grants, compare them. We also look at what neighborhood they're from, but this basically gives us an overview of that. Next slide. As I was alluding to, council loves equity amongst the neighborhoods. Each councillor is a liaison for 1 or 2 neighborhoods, and they're always asking, where are the grants going? Why is this neighborhood doesn't have as many grants as the other neighborhoods? That's something we do keep in mind, and it generally happens that way anyhow. It works out. Next slide. The types of projects, of course, we have the little libraries, the neighborhood festivals, and the gardens, and the murals, the ones that are more typical. Some of the things that have been a little more interesting are working with neighborhood association, neighborhood membership drives and their newsletters. There's lots of health and environment talks these days under that $1,000 project grant, heritage interpretive signs and routes of old streams across the city, play boxes and features that augment facilities at recreation, parks and recreation facilities. One neighborhood association, well, actually 2 have put together a supply trailers, so that gives them the mobility to move equipment to events they're having. We've got a bocce court, clothing swaps. We had one group put a temperature thermometer in the gorge waterway here to communicate to people that the water is warm enough for swimming in, which is a big pet project of theirs. Food security bike tour to tour of the gardens and around town, emergency containers, festive lighting. So lots of different, a wide diversity of projects. We take them from all quarters. Some of them are neighborhood residents that are just doing something very localized, and others can be a community association that's looking for a contribution to a larger budget grant. Next slide. Final report. We do ask for final report, just basically to cap off their project. What are your project objectives? Did you achieve them? It's really not a detailed, not meant to be an exhaustive 10-page document, just a page or two we ask for. We do ask for a financial breakdown. We allow some latitude for them to change up their budget a little bit, as long as things are generally along the same lines. But we do look for accountability there. And of course, photos from their project. Next slide. Lessons learned. I think these are some of the things that we found are most important. Be clear on the city's role in supporting projects. Some people anticipate that we're going to provide staff support to do installation work and help out with this, that, and the other thing, probably because we're such good-natured people in our support for the projects, the process at the outset. But we really do need to be clear that our colleagues don't share the same, have other work they're doing, and and we need to be accountable. So there's a limited role for how we will support them if it comes to parks and park staff or public works in doing work, unless it's been resolved, unless it's been identified at in the project plan. Resolve funding issues before we go into council. We ensure the budget's tight. We really need to make sure that it's viable. Some of the things that people submit, because this is a matching grant, need to be gone through to make sure they're on the up and up. Include maintenance and project closure in the agreements. This is really important for us to make sure that these projects are going to sit in the public realm or wherever they're going to sit, they're taken care of, and there's a plan for closure at the end of it. So many of these projects, in other cases, get left to the city to clean up after the fact, or it's ill-defined. So we really need to make sure that they have an idea of what they're going to do. We limit repeat grants, so we don't get them keep coming to the table for more money. We specify what the rates are for volunteer labor and professional labor. Sometimes those can get out of hand, especially the professional, if people want to bump up their matching grant with that. So we're clear on that. And finally, having turnkey project ideas is really helpful. This thing that you scoped out, it's easy to do and implement for people. They don't have to start from square one. Can be really helpful. Next slide. And that's it.
Great, thank you so much, Michael. Yeah, again, it's always just so exciting to see the differences between the different grants and to hear how they are making a difference in the communities that you're working in. So thank you for sharing those snippets of what neighborhood grants look like in all of your communities. What I'd like to do now is switch gears a bit and dive into the more technical aspects of your grants. I know, Michael, you gave us a bit more, and so we're still gonna ask some deeper questions. What I really appreciate is that there are some differences in your models, and I think that these are worth exploring further because they really demonstrate that there is no one right way to operate a grant program, but there are some key things to think about as you build out the model for your community neighborhood. So we're gonna launch into a bit of a panel discussion, but as we do this, if you have anybody or if you have any questions, just go ahead and put them in the chat box. And when we run through these questions, we'll turn to your questions next. So these have been generated from those of you who put in your questions ahead of time when you registered. So the first question, and I know this has been answered to some degree, but what are the eligibility criteria for your grants? Can anyone apply? Is it groups, associations, individual residents? What are those kinds of qualifications? But also, are there specific things that the grant must accomplish, like beautification or social connection? You've kind of touched on that, but I'm wondering if we could go just a little bit deeper and hammer that question. We start maybe with Jenna.
Yeah, for sure. So with the new grant, essentially any informal or formal group can apply, neighborhood groups. So it can be like a neighborhood association, a not-for-profit, or a super informal group of a few neighbors who want to do something in their neighborhood. The project has to occur within the Kitchener city limits, of course, and has to be geographically defined within a neighborhood. We don't we don't necessarily define what the neighborhoods are, but we ask that the group define what their neighborhood may be. Projects, as I said, this year are now a little bit more, we have more flexibility in terms of projects being on public owned land, as long as they're accessible to the public, as well as private land. So things like schools or cultural, faith and cultural centers, things like that. We allow them to now have projects done in those locations, as long, again, as they're open to the public, and there is some sort of accessibility and inclusion piece as well. We only fund one-time projects, so we can't do, we don't approve projects that are ongoing or need ongoing maintenance necessarily. Generally, there's a few criteria, few purposes for the grants, as I mentioned before, in terms of building neighborhood connections, developing stronger relationships, enhancing spaces. As a whole, we want the project to contribute to the neighborhood identity in some way, shape, or form, and that's built into our criteria as well. And we ask that the project be equitable and encourages diverse neighborhood voices to be included in the involvement of the project, or at least in the community engagement and participation piece. So those projects within our criteria are given preference by the selection committee.
Great, thank you. Over to you, Calgary.
Hi there. So with our program, we've kind of already mentioned that we work in targeted neighborhoods. And so residents or community groups in those neighborhoods can apply for funds to do a project in that targeted neighborhood. You don't need nonprofit status. You don't need matching funds. The only organizations that we do provide funding to are the community associations or informal groups of residents. In order for a project to be approved, the project, I've already mentioned, it must benefit the local neighborhood. It has to be led by community members. It has to be accessible and inclusive. It has to make a difference in the lives of vulnerable populations. We want to see a promotion of volunteerism and encourage cooperation between groups and community members in the neighborhood, because we want to see bridging of social capital, and we want to see leadership capacity development within those neighborhoods. We've already mentioned our 3 funding streams. So of course, we're looking for projects that fit one of those streams, that economic participation, social inclusion, or projects that foster TRC, the neighborhood level. I think that's.
Yeah, and Mike from Victoria, I would, I'd echo Jenna's comments that we do, it's located in the city of Victoria. The project has to occur in the city of Victoria, and the idea of being accessible to the public, that's one that comes up for us as well. Some people want to put it in a sort of semi-private places, so we really have to make sure that it's available to the public. Like school grounds is a typical one that will allow projects in school grounds or at community centers where folks can get to them. I have to say that one thing is with us, when it comes to the criteria, we have our goals, and we're quite flexible in our criteria as long as they meet a minimal criteria. We're not oversubscribed in our grant program. In fact, we have 2 intakes a year, and neither one of those has ever been much beyond 50% for some miraculous reason. But so that means we're not driving so hard on the community development attributes. We definitely have a minimal requirement for them, and generally all of them meet them quite well. But we don't have that pressure of being oversubscribed.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to start with you for our next question. What supports do you offer for anyone interested in applying for a grant or implementing a grant? I know you kind of alluded to, you spoke a little bit about it, but if you could just tell us a little bit more about the support that you offer.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that we're really we're not passive about it. We don't. If somebody expresses an interest, we communicate with them right away and talk about how they might accomplish it, or modify their goals and objectives to ensure that it's something that's doable and feasible. You know, we envisage the program as being something we want to maximize uptake. So anything that gets in the way of that happening, and some applicants, the process can be a little, people get turned off very easily, as we know, those of us who are involved in community development. If there's something the least bit alienating towards them or complicated, people will put down the pen or turn the screen off or whatever, won't follow through on it. So it's helpful to have a little bit of encouragement if somebody does have an idea, to fan those flames and grow those embers and translate that into some kind of project. Sometimes that means taking somebody's larger scale ideas and narrowing them down and saying, well, why don't you just do one element of that and be successful with that, and we would support you all the way. And I think that's helped us with a large number of our grant applicants.
That's great, thank you. Over to you, Joy and Christine. Tell us a little bit about how you support people throughout the process.
Sure, like we mentioned, the granting is a community development tool for us. So in neighborhoods where community social workers are assigned, we did find that lots of times residents would have a really great creative idea in terms of what they'd like to see happen in their neighborhood or how neighbors could connect better with neighbors. And often money was a barrier to some of these ideas. And so when the granting program came in, we were able to have people access just little bits of money, like maximum $1,000, but as well that community social worker support who works in that neighborhood. And so right from working with the group of residents that have this passionate idea to helping people with low literacy skills in written English to fill out the application, to all the steps in between, really truly, as much as we are happy to see the great ideas come alive in the neighborhood, it's about us developing those leadership skills in residents that maybe they have leadership skills already, but not the confidence to showcase them, or they need some coaching along the way to feel like they can actually make a difference in their environment and on the issues that are affected by them. So we really support throughout.
Great, thank you. I love hearing the differences and similarities among all of these. And so Jenna, I'm looking forward to hearing how you Kitchener.
Yeah, so we have, when the program launched, a big part of that was developing a lot of tools and guidebooks and things like that. So we have kind of those like 101 guides that are available online. But we know that doesn't help a group really kind of flesh out their whole idea and their whole grant application. So what we've seen over the years, and we've actually had some staffing changes recently as a result of this trend, is that our single point of contact approach, in which we set up a group with the neighborhood liaison, has been the most successful way of really creating strong grant applications. And we've seen this over the past year and a half that we've implemented that approach, where we've connected every group with a neighborhood liaison as a support to help them navigate City Hall, city processes, kind of break down red tape and things like that. That's really, I would say, our number one resource in supporting grant applications and applicants across the city. A big part of that is doing targeted engagement as well in wards that maybe haven't been as involved in the Love My Hood program in the past. But that's definitely the most effective tool that we've implemented. Corporately, we're working on translation services and translating documents so that they can be, again, more inclusive and equitable across the city. So that's something that is happening in our customer service department that will really directly benefit the tools that we have as well. But that, again, our neighborhood liaisons are definitely our biggest asset in terms of supporting resident groups.
Great, thank you. I'm going to start with Joy and Christine on this next question. How are decisions made about which grants to fund and who is involved in these decisions?
Hi, Glenda. I've already kind of alluded to in our mini presentation that we have a neighborhood advisory committee. So they're localized groups of community residents that are working with a community social worker. And I saw one of the questions popped up about the role of a community social worker. Our, we call CSWs, they do community development in targeted neighborhoods. So we also see the advisory committees as being an extension of that process. We're trying to develop leadership on the ground. So they're made up of a mix of community members that come together. They use a consensus decision-making model. So it's not voting, but it's an in-person opportunity to discuss the project, to build ideas to strengthen the project. And then the feedback is given to the applicant. And it's a very kind of transparent process. So oftentimes the feedback looks something like, you know, we really like your idea, and, you know, would you consider these ways of strengthening kind of maybe social inclusion aspects or that type of thing. Our program's really based on the idea that community members, community residents know their neighborhood best, and so they can help really spark and new ideas and energy to really make the project even better.
That's great. I love that, you know, our neighbors are the ones who know it best. And so to have them as part of that decision-making table, that's quite incredible. Let's go to Jenna next for this one.
Yeah, so I think there's some questions about selection committee as well. Since this year we have more residents on our selection committee, 6 residents from the community versus city staff. There's about 4 city staff on it. And then there's 1 spot that we're holding for a representative from a sponsoring organization. So in terms of selecting the resident volunteers, we've done kind of a decision matrix in terms of selecting them. So it is based off of their application questions and their interview questions. But then we've also taken in consideration what ward they're from, what information regarding their backgrounds that they've disclosed in terms of if they're new to Canada or if they are from a community that's new and emerging in Kitchener. That's how we've kind of selected our selection committee for the year. And as a whole, the residents and the city staff are the ones who make the decision through the selection committee for the grant. And that model, it's quarterly review period. So they start off with an online review through this tool called Decision.io. So it's kind of like a canvas of each grant application. And that's where they rank based off of the criteria specifically. So the applicants' answers to the questions on our grant application are funneled through there, and the selection committee can provide a light rating and as well as commentary and feedback on each of the criteria specific questions. Of course, that doesn't determine if a project is successful or not, and that's where those in-person meetings that we have with the selection committee come into play, because they can really discuss the new and emerging groups, ward distribution of grants as well. And so we have this like kind of preliminary ranking through the grant criteria, and then it moves into the discussion and consensus making model, where we're taking into consideration the equitable distribution of grants across the city, new and emerging groups versus groups that are maybe quite active already. And it's really just a discussion with city staff about feasibility, and with the resident representatives about, is it representative of Kitchener, and is it having an impact on different communities across the city. So that's kind of how we've done it in the past, but we've just elevated it this year with having more of a focus on that equity piece, and awarding at least 1 grant per year in all of the city's 10 wards. That's a new kind of stipulation that we've added in, because that is something that came up quite a bit in the council's discussions about grants. And I think Michael had mentioned this when councillors say, well, maybe like, why hasn't this award gotten as much funding compared to this ward? And so that's something we're really trying to address with our neighborhood liaisons, doing that targeting in wards, but also through the selection committee, and putting that at the forefront, that equity piece, and the equal distribution of grants as well across the city.
That's great. I know you've made a bunch of changes, and I can see
Yes.
pieces. That's great. Thank you. And Michael, over to you. How are decisions made?
Yeah, I think with our program, we really rely on our matrix to ensure that people are meeting the criteria, and then it goes to council, and council really sort of makes that final determination of whether they'll be approved or not. And they have yet to disagree with our recommendations. I think when it comes to having a participatory process, we haven't really found, because we're not oversubscribed. So if there was if we needed something to go to council and say, here's how we've arrived at this decision, other than our evaluation matrix, which I say it's there for interest and to demonstrate accountability, but it doesn't really, no applicants are denied their requests. So we haven't found that there's value in putting any more elements into the decision-making or recommendation process. There's a price to pay for having a participatory process in terms of administrative burden. But so if we were to have something to gain from that, and there would be merit in having, of course, having the community involved in a process has its merits, but that's weighed against the administrative costs of creating a more complicated process. I hope that makes sense. We do have a participatory budgeting grant that is another grant pocket that council's established where the community is directly involved in managing that, evaluating projects and determining where the funding is going to go.
Great, thanks, Michael. I know I've seen some people wondering if we'll share that matrix, and just so that everybody knows, we will share out the PowerPoint afterwards, so you'll get to have that as well. Because I do think it's interesting, the different models of decision making and how even those decisions about decision making have been made. So it's really interesting. So thank you everybody for sharing about that. And I guess one of the big questions is, we can't do this neighborhood grant program without funding. So do you have, where does your funding come from? Do you have any partnerships that help make this possible? Maybe, Michael, do you want to start with this one?
Yeah, I think our program fills a specific niche. There are other grant programs available. Council, I mentioned the participatory budgeting program that has a set budget of, I believe I want to say $60,000 or $90,000, somewhere in there, where there's a theme for each. I believe it's youth this year. There's a theme for each year, and then that participatory budgeting process comes around that. And then there's council also has a larger grant envelope for achieving its objectives that it's specified in its strategic plan over their council's mandate. So anybody can apply for that to help them fulfill their goals and ambitions for the city over their mandate. So there's those other things in play for the city. When it comes down to the grants themselves, it's usually the match comes from sweat equity on the part of the participants, or some funding they've managed to raise, but it's really a small part of it. And so I'd say no, generally there aren't other grants that come into play to provide monetary support. It's more a question of those in-kind contributions that come from the community groups.
Okay, thank you. What about over in Calgary, Joy and Christine?
Sure. As I listen, I just think it's we're so small compared to other people. We obviously the city of Calgary has a different variety of grants, and some of which would require council approval. But our grant is so small; it's a tool in our program budget, and so just within our own little program budget, we manage this, and I feel like that's probably, it's just a different scope. It's just a different scope in terms of managing compared to the other two examples. It's we don't ask for matching funds. Certainly though, if of a group of residents in a neighborhood have been working with somebody else that's contributing something, whether it be in-kind hot dog buns or in-kind lumber for a community garden box, well, certainly we'll take that, but it's not a requirement. Yeah, I just think we're quite small scale.
If I can comment on that, I know that I say that smaller grants are way easier administratively for anybody that's thinking of setting up a program. The larger the grant, even the difference between the 1,000 and the 5,000, they get more complicated. And if you're going to 10,000 or 50 or 100,000, I know some cities have done that. You really do need to have a lot more support that goes behind that. So if anybody's thinking about setting up a program, those smaller grant programs are great. You don't have to worry too much about a $500 or $1,000 grant in terms of everything that the whole approval process and accountability and everything that goes along with it.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Michael. And I do appreciate the scope, and I think that's why it's so important we have everybody here, because again, it talks to how different models fit different communities at different stages. And it also sets up Jenna really quite nicely to talk about your funding model.
Yeah, I'd say we're definitely on the bigger scale in terms of grants. We now have up to 30,000 available per project. Prior to that, we had a max of 20,000 available through our placemaking grant per project and 15,000 available through our previous neighborhood matching grant. So projects will definitely be a lot bigger scale. We saw in past grant applications a trend for capital projects. So groups would match or fundraise, up to 20,000 per their project. So we would have grants up to like 60,000 or more coming through the pipeline. So we wanted to open up that a possibility a bit more because we were seeing a lot more of that. And with those projects, I would say that there's a lot more through our office, a project management piece. That's where my role and kind of comes into play. And because those projects, for example, an outdoor gym in Victoria Park, it becomes a city asset, but it originated as a resident-led project and something that they saw as filling a need in their neighborhood. So there's definitely a scale of projects, and I echo Mike's sentiments that large projects and large grants are much more difficult to manage, but we're working it out, and introducing the project management piece has been a way of doing that. In terms of where the funding comes from, our program, the Love My Hood program, as well as the grant, which is a large portion of what our program is approved by council. So it is a city budget. We previously had sponsors for our neighborhood matching grant. This year we're working on securing sponsorships, but we're looking at using that sponsorship money for things like a street team as opposed to the grant itself, so we can do more activations in the neighborhood. So the majority of the money for the grant funding this year specifically is approved by council. So we're excited to be able to offer those larger grants. And I think that it came out of the decision that, and the understanding that the Love My Hood program is more of a core service at the city now, and something that we're moving towards in supporting residents and doing.
It's exciting times over in Kitchener.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, I do want to get to questions from everybody, but I do want to ask, one parting thought. You can give like a lesson learned or one recommendation. Like, what's the top thing you think people should consider when they're doing a grant? And I know, Michael, you kind of popped up there, and so we've heard lots of things throughout this, but what would you say is your number one recommendation? Jenna, as you Michael, go for it.
Certainly. Sorry, was that me?
No, go.
I think there's a number of them that I've mentioned already, but I think really it's in our particular community, it's cultivating ideas and getting stimulating ideas that people will act on. So making that happen. Sometimes we're kind of wondering why we haven't had a bigger uptake or more ideas haven't come forward, despite our best efforts. So really stimulating thought in terms of what people can do, connecting with the people out in the community and make sure they're aware of the program and the ideas, and that they see a clear pathway towards getting engaged in our grant process, especially for, as I say, these smaller grants, 5,000 and less.
Perfect, thank you. Jenna?
Yeah, I think one of our biggest lessons learned from the launch of Love My Hood in 2017 to where we are now, and in having our 3 previous grants. The biggest thing, the foundation of Love My Hood was talking to people, going to work in their own neighborhoods, and I think that is the continuing trend that we've seen. We track a lot of data in terms of what projects are popular, what we see coming through the pipeline, but it's really the evaluation piece and understanding what people are saying and what people want, and having that flexibility to be able to pivot and adjust if needed to better serve the residents. And I think that listening to residents is really my biggest takeaway in launching this new grant and making the changes to our previous granting system, has really been based off of what we saw and what we heard from residents.
Great, thank you. Christine and Joy.
Hey there. This shouldn't come at any surprise after the presentation, but building in that staff support throughout the process is really important, especially if you want your program to be available and accessible to community members that face maybe barriers to traditional leadership opportunities. And we've really seen a benefit in doing that. We see people, they start out with maybe something smaller, like a block party or gathering their neighbors together to celebrate an event, that they build their capacity and their confidence to take on even larger projects in their neighborhood. And I don't think that those opportunities will happen without that kind of support at times, at critical moments.
Perfect, thank you. Heather, I'm going to turn to you. You've been monitoring the chat box. You've seen some questions. What questions do you have?
So we've got kind of 5 questions. So the first one, and we've sort of touched upon it when we talked about neighborhood liaisons and community social workers. But the question is, how many staff do you have that supports the whole granting program? What department leads it? And I'm taking it even a little bit further from what people are asking. And how are you involving other departments? And I know Calgary, how do you involve others? Because you're not running through the city per se, but how do you involve others in it?
Hi. Yeah, we're small. I think right now we're sitting at about 25 community social workers, and not all of our 23 neighborhoods in which we work have a grant program. I think we're up to 15 neighborhoods targeted that have the grant program. So again, really small, but we don't have one dedicated person for the grant. As we mentioned, like, staff use this as a tool in their community development toolbox. So when it makes sense in a neighborhood to create a granting program, then we'll work with residents to do that and create the advisory committee, et cetera. But we don't have anybody with a full-time job just to do grants alone, because there's many other community development interventions than just grants. So I hope that answers that question. Oh, and we're Calgary Neighborhoods. That's our department.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. How do we work with other business units? Well, when it doesn't happen often, but if the grant does cross a line into another business unit's department, community gardens might be a good one, because that would cross in our world into possibly parks. We certainly have connections and can call and find support. So it's pretty informal that way.
Okay. Jenna, do you want to?
Yeah, so our department recently got bigger with, after going to council in September, and they officially approved it with the budget meeting this past January. So we went from 3 people supporting, in the neighborhood development office, supporting the program, with 5 neighborhood liaisons who were under community centers. And now our department is 9 people. We're adding additional project manager on as well. So we are now 9 people supporting the whole Love My Hood program, including the grant. And that will help, I think, build our capacity in changing the neighborhood liaison role to full-time roles as well, in supporting residents a lot more than we previously could. We work really closely with other city departments. A part of our grant application process, once a grant is approved by the selection committee, it moves into an internal circulation where we also use the Decision.io tool, and that's been a lifesaver for us because it circulates a successful grant application to all of the departments that we work with. So everyone from parks to planning to active transportation to community engagement, they all get to review the successful grant applications and provide feedback. So they also use the same light rating as well. So they actually can give something a red light. And if something is given a red light, we'll have a one-on-one meeting with the project lead, so the neighborhood liaison, and whoever maybe gave something a red light rating. So we can kind of workshop it. This year, we're introducing quarterly internal meetings. So once the internal staff reviewed something online, we'll actually have a meeting with them right after, directly after their online review portion. And we'll kind of workshop things a bit more and decide, how a project can move forward and, creative problem solve and things like that. So we because our work really touches on so many different departments, whether it be, crosswalks, painted crosswalks that affect traffic calming initiatives from the active transportation office, or, putting a outdoor gym into a popular park that affects, parks work plan as well. So because it really touches on so many different departments' works, especially the larger scale projects, we really found that that internal circulation period has been huge, and it required a lot of change management work in the initial beginning of Love My Hood, but we've come a really far way and have gotten a lot of buy-in from the different departments, which has made a world of difference in where we've come and where we continue to grow.
That's great. There's a couple more questions. So I'm going to just jump to the next one, and maybe Victoria, what's your name? Kevin? Mark?
Mike?
Mike! Sorry. Mike, maybe you can answer this one about liability and insurance, and who covers that? How do you kind of mitigate that?
Good question. Great question. If there's a sponsoring group, they usually have insurance that covers the activity. If it's through the process of, if it's an installation or a field hockey game or whatever, a festival, whatever it happens to be, so we usually look to them to cover that. If it's going to be a piece that's going into the it's actually a little library or something that's sitting out there, and we need insurance for a period of time, we look to them to look for the sponsoring group to come up with some answer of how they're going to handle that. It really does a lot of times boil down to looking at what the risk is. If we're putting something in the public realm, we may evaluate it and say that's not going to be a problem. It's something on an artwork on the side of a street mural or something like that, where there's no real increased risk involved with the project once it's done. But a street mural would be a good example of one too, where they're actually executing it. You've got members of the public out on the street painting it. We would be concerned about them having insurance for the installation of it. So it really depends on the project where we're looking for the insurance and liability coverage and whether it's applicable or not.
And like Jenna going to all the different departments, when you talked about the red light, would that be one of the departments that might say, well, wait a second, that to a lending library, somebody might cut off their finger?
Yeah, so insurance has been really interesting for us. Also, another area we have worked really, really closely with our legal and liability teams. We actually, that used to be more of an issue in the earlier days of the program. Since then, we've developed a few different insurance packages for resident groups. So, and depending on the amount of people going to an event or whatever kind of the threshold may be for a certain package or project type, we actually cover the insurance. So we have a pool our budget kind of pooled away to cover those costs. So for example, community gardens, we cover the insurance for all of the community gardens across the city on city-owned land. So the group really just has to do a monthly safety checks to ensure the insurance is actually in place and they're meeting those requirements. But we develop a package with our teams at the city, other internal departments to help kind of mitigate that risk and make people feel like they can do things and without fearing liability issues. For street parties, for example, if you have under 250 people at your street party, we'll cover the insurance. If it's over that, you can purchase insurance from us. So we're kind of weirdly, we joke that we're sometimes administering insurance to groups, aren't the ones doing that. We have our legal team helping us out with that, but it is something that we offer, which is a great way to mitigate risk and make residents feel confident in what they're doing and safe, which is really important to us. So that's kind of a unique feature, I think, of our program, is in those insurance packages, and we're constantly developing those. For example, markets, neighborhood markets and pop-up markets are kind of a new trend that we're seeing, and we have a guide to support that. And we're working on this like neighborhood market insurance kit and expanding it past just, getting, using vendors from the Kitchener market. You can now use a wider range of vendors. So we're constantly bugging the people in our coworkers in the insurance office, but it's produced a lot of great results and keeping our residents safe.
Okay,
I'd just say with the last question Jen answered about building relationships with staff, both in terms of insurance and liability and parks and getting through things, I could echo almost exactly what Jen was saying along those lines, and really establishing that buy-in from your colleagues. And sometimes that has to come from above, is that the city does support this program, and people, colleagues can get caught up in their own perspectives and their own workloads, but when it comes to neighborhood grants, it requires that they shift their perspective a little bit and look at how they can help us make a win situation with the projects. And as you develop those relationships and those processes, then things get a lot better and a lot smoother.
Mm-hmm. I remember we were talking with Josh, who led the Love My Hood about a year ago, and his advice, and it stuck with me, was is that being transparent and building those relationships from the very beginning with all the departments, to roll out the program to the departments after it's been approved is very hard to build relationships. And so, when you're, and this goes with any new program, is building and talking with the different departments and the partners and building that relationship and trust as you're going.
And I think, and so many departments have their priorities and their workloads and work plans, and this program kind of came out of nowhere and really exploded, which is great because it's obviously very well received by the community. So Josh always uses this metaphor of like the train has already left the stations, but we're like now flying down the tracks. And so that's why we've done a lot of, again, that change management work with the internal departments to get where we are now. And I feel like we've laid down those tracks, so to speak.
So, and I really like that we have all different examples. So we've got Calgary, which is your small, and I actually think that's great. Let's start small and build from there. And I love that toolbox, like that you have that in as a tool in your community developing program. And and then you got Victoria, which is your medium size, and building that up. And then you've got Kitchener, which is a massive city, and doing it and just seeing that it works, and that each one is individual, but yet you see commonalities. And I have a couple other questions about sharing your processes. Are you willing to share the criteria, your guides, decision-making tool, etc.? And my other question we're not going to get to is communication. Like, how do you communicate to the community about these grants? And then how do you communicate the results, like the stories and the great things? But I think that's something that we're not going to get to, but those are two questions that are lingering. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Glenda.
Thanks. I was going to say, I want to keep going, and I also want to be mindful of the time. So thank you, everybody who's stuck with us through like past the time we agreed to. And I just really want to say thank you to all of our panelists who came and who worked hard on the case study. So if you have some more detailed questions, a good place to maybe start is with the Fostering Neighborhoods or Fostering Community Through Neighborhood Grants case study, which we'll send out along with the PowerPoint slides, because you might get some of the details that you're looking for through there. But I think, and I haven't asked them, but I'm sure it's going to be okay that if you have specific questions for one of the communities that's represented here, that you could reach out to them, and we'll share their emails out afterwards. And just a few things before you go. If you haven't heard yet, we have finally launched the ABCD London, our annual event around asset-based community development. It's happening June 9th to 11th, and we hope that you will join us. It's going to be even bigger and better than last year, which was a pretty inspiring and exciting experience for everybody there. So if you have any questions, you can reach out to me or check out our events page at tamarackcommunity.ca. We have more webinars coming up, of course, because we like to spend time with you. And we have this one all about asking our communities and learning how to create more community engagement, participation, and involvement in the work that we're doing. So we hope that you'll join us for that one on February 25th. And we have one coming up on March 12th around applying ABCD in an urban Indigenous context. And if you were at ABCD Edmonton last year, you will have met Lori Sokulak, and she was a very popular presenter, and people have asked us to dive a little deeper, and she's agreed. So this is a webinar if you're interested in going a little deeper. And if you know any young people or work with young people groups, we are calling all Canadian youth photographers to help capture what community means to them, what their hopes and their fears are about community. And that brings us to the end today. So thank you so much. We're so delighted that you're here. And thanks again to our panelists who have just done a great job and sharing the work that they're doing. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next time.